And yes, it's recording.
Well, please smile for the camera. You're being recorded for posterity. Please give us your broadest smile. I know you guys are a little far away from the webcam, people there with Joey. So, but still we can see you smile. Yeah, thank you. That looks nice. Thank you. Appreciate that. So we have people from all over the place. We have Jamaica, Canada, Dominican Republic, the United States. What am I missing? Am I missing any country? If I'm missing it, please just type it down in the chat box. If you're new to, before we start, I would like just to do please, I welcome you, and also just 1 minute of housekeeping. There's beneath all the cameras, there's the icon of the chat box. If you click on it, the chat box will appear to your right, as well as the participants list. And if you have any questions that you would like to provide, ask our panelists, you could do it over there as well. As you know, this is a recorded session, that session that's being recorded, and we appreciate all your questions and all your feedback in order to do this as most interactive session as we can for time being. We have an hour and 15 minutes scheduled for today's session, and well, I would like to introduce our panelists, but I would rather prefer for them to present themselves. All of them have a lot of experience in our profession. I've seen them train, participating in some of the sessions. Actually, I've been part of their pre-conference sessions as well. So I know you will be very pleased with the result today, and ensure that you have your sharpest questions here, because they will be able to answer them to the fullest, I hope, and I know. So please, Susan, can you introduce yourself, where you're connected today, and please share a little bit about yourself.
Hi, thank you, Hector, and welcome everyone. My name is Susan Peryam. I am an IAF certified professional facilitator. I have been in the profession of facilitation as an independent contractor for 10 years now. Prior to that, I was 30 years in corporate America, so that may be interesting to share my story of how I made the leap to facilitation. My home base is south of Atlanta, Georgia. My summer home is in the mountains of southern Wyoming. I'm coming to you on mountain time today.
Thank you, Susan, and very much welcome. Kathleen, please.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Kathleen Paris, and I'm here in Madison, Wisconsin, where I live. I don't usually admit this, but I've actually been facilitating for 40 years now, starting back in the 20th century, and have been involved with IAF since around 2000, early 2000s, and had some years on my own as an independent consultant, and also 10 years at the University of Wisconsin as an internal consultant to the provost and working in higher education.
Thank you, Kathleen, and welcome. Izzy, please.
I came to facilitation. I've been part of IAF maybe 20 years. I came to facilitation through the side door. I started out as a teacher, and then was a stand-up comic, and then became a keynote speaker. And from becoming a keynote speaker and needing activities when I was asked to do longer programs, I began to use my experience as an improviser and teacher trainer with some of the activities, and found that I really enjoyed engaging groups. My first experience with IAF was actually as a presenter. And once I got there, and my presentation was on using activities, improv activities. And what I found was that I did not know about facilitation, and that I was actually facilitating groups. So I began to use IAF as a path to self-learning. And what I found is that the principles of facilitation are really applicable to my life in general. So I was able to come to facilitation as a process for myself, and the interactivity of the work that I did really blended well. So I'm very fortunate to facilitate the work that I do with the people that I do, and I love spreading the word.
And we're very fortunate to have you, Izzy. Please, Cameron, all the way from Toronto.
No, Ottawa.
Oh, sorry. I forgot. I was so in love with Toronto after last board meeting that I want to go back, I think. My apologies.
Well,
Ottawa.
Come and see Ottawa, you'll be happier. And I grew up just outside of Toronto, and so no offense, Marion. I'm based in Ottawa, Canada, where next year's North American Conference is, and you should absolutely come. It's a beautiful place. And it'll be a terrific conference. I may be a little biased. I came from a background a career where I was delivering a lot of training. It wasn't actually my primary role, but I was doing a lot of training delivery. And the organization I was working with had a customer who I discovered later was a facilitator. And he and I were chatting about the kind of work he was doing and the kind of work I was doing. And at some point, he decided to recruit me into the world of facilitation, and I didn't really know what I was getting into, but I took some training and made the transition. And because what I had discovered is the parts of my job that I really enjoyed doing in my previous career were all the ones that weren't in the job description and that could go away quite happily if the company changed their mind, and I wanted to continue to pursue that. So I went out as an independent, working in conjunction with this other fellow. There were about 15 of us as a collective, if you will, and did that for several years, thinking this stuff is fabulous, doing a lot of work with the Canadian government because you can't live in Ottawa and not, and wondering, this is incredibly good stuff. Why doesn't anybody else know about it? And in 2000, I was at the IAF conference in Toronto, where there were 1,200 other people from all around the world who knew about it. And that was a real eye-opener for me, and I've been involved with the association ever since. And it's immensely broadened my horizons and what I think of when I think about facilitation.
So thank you, Cameron. So we've listened a little bit about different ways of becoming a facilitator. There's as Izzy was saying, sometimes we came from the side, sometimes right from the middle, sometimes it's just something that our clients, our customers ask. I think the question here is that when were you aware for the first time that you were doing something that was unique, that was not training or conferences, or when you realized that facilitation was something else? When was your aha moment that you realized that? If anybody would like to raise their hand.
I'll jump in.
Please, Susan.
Yeah, so a little bit more background. I said I came out of a corporate career 30-some years, and there's a theme to this. My original occupation was in accounting. In the U.S., we have a certification for accountants, so I went after that certification. And my specialty was cost accounting in manufacturing. So I was very close to the shop floor, if you will, understanding how a product's produced and the cost of a product, inventory control, waste minimization. That career in manufacturing, I was with a company that wanted to grow my leadership skills, and so they wanted me to move into a support role rather than the accounting function, and help implement performance, organizational principles, or self-directed work teams. So this was probably in the early 80s when teams and quality circles was coming about. And I got the bug in my pit of my stomach that said, wow, what a difference in employees at the top floor if they understand who the customer is, how the product's made from, A to Z rather than, just their piece of the puzzle. Well, while I was in that role and learning all about high performance organization design and empowering teams, I met a friend through a hobby that invited me into the banking industry to bring those same type of principles around employee engagement and teamwork. And so I actually made a move from manufacturing into the banking industry to the 10th largest bank in the United States.
That's cool.
Had the ability to create a department for operations and technology where we could apply some of these principles that manufacturing was probably 10 years ahead of banking. And at the time I thought, well, what do I call this department? And at that time, quality management was expanding its role from just quality control into this performance excellence. And so I named the department Quality Management and had responsibility for 10 operating centers, over 7,000 people implementing these quality management practices, employee empowerment, quality circles, and the theme of, gosh, if that's what I'm in charge of, I better become certified. So I became a certified quality manager through our American Society for Quality. And I had a nice run at changing backroom operations in banking and was recognized nationally through our Fed system for that work. And then lo and behold, someone from the TV and broadcasting industry that I met through the quality management profession said, would you come into this TV business and do some of that stuff that you're doing in banking? And, when you get these challenges or offers, you kind of say, oh, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know the industry. But wait a minute, my skills are proving to be portable no matter what the industry. So I took the leap and went into TV and was with a small group of 5 people that was implementing business excellence practices. And there was a group that was, with this group, we became very well versed in our Baldrige National Quality Award and the state level award. And lo and behold, I ran into this person that called himself a facilitator. And he also was a trainer. And I was intrigued by this facilitator because I sat back and said, well, he's all about enabling groups and teams to work together. And so I pursued that facilitation. I thought, wow, that's interesting. That's kind of like a good capstone for all the work that I've done. Well, I was in the TV industry, Turner Broadcasting, and they actually asked me to develop a cadre of facilitators throughout the company. And once again, I said, well, if I'm going to be in charge of that, I better get the certification so I have some professional oomph behind me. And that's in 2005 when I became the certified professional facilitator and have been involved in IAF in different ways ever since. I am also an assessor for CPFs. But to answer your question, when did I realize it was facilitation? It was that light bulb moment when I met this person that called themselves a facilitator and introduced me to the Southeast Association of Facilitators and IAF. At the time, SEAF was a link to IAF in some capacity that doesn't exist right now because of the new structure. But anyways, I semi-retired 10 years ago, and I thought that facilitation was the right umbrella to take all of my experience that was portable no matter what the industry. And I've had a very successful business for 10 years, mostly facilitating group process design, but also clients ask to improve the skills in their organization. So with a partner, we've created training, and we've been training basics in facilitation now for 10 years. So long-winded, but that's the story, and I'll sign off now.
It's interesting what you're saying, because some people would say an engineer, yeah, that's a hard skill. That's a total different thing. But you actually came from that area and you evolved. It's interesting what you're saying is that portability of skills across industries. It means that it's needed everywhere.
Absolutely. And one of my biggest learnings, you know, when I was an accountant, everything in the world was rules and black and white. But the more that I moved up in leadership, I realized that people had to implement policies and practices while I did not have direct authority over them. So how to encourage, motivate, enable, and that term of enable stuck with me, and how to get people engaged in policies or practices, you know, so that they owned them and would commit and follow through. And that's the passion that still burns, you know, in my gut, if you will, today.
Thank you, Susan. Anyone would like to take it? Go ahead, Cameron.
Sure. I think that the first time I ever facilitated anything was probably 5 to 8 years before I knew what to call it. And the reason was that in the mid to late 80s, I was, much longer than that, but I was a member of the military reserve in Canada in a very small unit in a very trivial role. And the catch with that is that it had all of the trappings of everything you would associate with the military. Uniforms, ranks, lots of structure, all of those things, and everybody was a volunteer. There was no actual power involved with the rank. And so if you wanted to get anything done, it absolutely had to be done in cooperation and through engagement. And so that's the way I worked. It was a fundamental understanding that really the choices were try to do it with a power structure that wasn't really there and is not really my inclination anyway. Do all the work yourself, in which case you will burn out, or engage people. And being both I think a reasonably intelligent and a lazy guy, I chose the latter one.
Thank you.
5 years later, I knew what to call it.
Kathleen, go ahead, Kathleen.
I had the good fortune to have someone on my staff when I was a vice president of a small college who had gotten her training at the ICA, Institute of Cultural Affairs, in planning, strategic planning. And at the time, planners were specialized people with piles of green bar, which probably some people don't even know what that is anymore. You know, all this computer printed data, and there'd be planners who would plan for organizations. And she said, no, we should engage people, which was a revolutionary idea at the time. So I saw her just create this magic of asking people what their vision and their hopes and dreams for the future were, and having plans coming out that everybody could see a little piece of themselves in it. To me, it was just alchemy. It was pure magic. So I wanted to do that too. And so I actually went to the ICA and got trained in strategic planning. And to this day, I use some of the techniques and I say some of the things that I heard and saw her say. So what it kind of says to me is, for people who are interested in or even just getting into the field, the value of just watching another facilitator perform the magic of facilitation.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathleen. Izzy.
Again, I wasn't aware of facilitation until I was had a participant in one of my programs. I think it was on a stress management program, maybe in the mid '90s. Said you should go to IAF. What you're doing is facilitating, and my initial response was no, because I'm giving up control. And my background being a teacher, both at university level and middle school level, and with stand-up comedy and with improv was that it is about the control. You can create a container and you control within the container. What really hit me about facilitation was the realization about letting go, and that the process was the key. Everything else, training, teaching, is very much about a process to reach an end result, and the focus is on the goal, the tests, the metrics. And what I experienced at my first IAF conference, going to classes with Roger Schwartz and Sandy Schumann and people who just really had heart and put their heart into it, what I understood was that my issue was about trying to control things. And really what I'm interested in is a process. And the engagement I understood, but I thought the engagement came from the control. And what I see in facilitation is that the engagement is in the curiosity engendered by the process. So it's about what next, what else, how, what do you think, why is this? So it's that questioning curiosity approach that really struck me. And what the name for that is facilitation. To me, it's about a curiosity about a goal with letting go of the need to have one particular path to the goal. So the subset of that for me was letting go, okay, I can design the process, I can think about the modules, and I need to let go of the fact that that's the only way to do it. So then the concept of trusting the group comes in. So that's where I began to really understand the intricacies of facilitation.
Interesting. We have quite a variety of craftsmen and women here of the art of facilitation. One coming from the area, as Susan said, from the need of the customer. You were actually responding to a need of the customer, whatever they may call it. Another one was saying, okay, I want to do this. I want to be into it, like Kathleen committed herself with the ICA. And then we have Izzy that, I mean, you actually didn't want it to get into it, and now 20 years later, you're here. Look at that. I have to wonder what would have happened if you wanted to jump in right away. I mean, it would be quite interesting. So, I mean, when you started, and I'm going to take advantage of Kathleen sharing with us that she still uses some of the things that she just started there. When you started with the ICA, what are one of the first learnings, tips, or techniques that you, I mean, in those first times that you had to do this, this facilitation, that you could share with the rest, that you would see that they continue to be an advantage to use, and it's part of your fundamentals, I would say, of your practice.
Yeah.
I mean, what are your favorite techniques and your methods? Yeah. Or your little things, and I would I'll start with you, Kathleen, so you can share what are the things that the rest of the participants can learn from you and can take away for their own practice as well.
Okay, well, I would say the power of inquiry is something that I learned and that has really sustained my practice since then, and it relates a little bit to what Izzy said about really harnessing people's native curiosity and wanting to know more. The power of the question just cannot be overstated. You know, if there's if things aren't going well, ask a question. Is this helpful to you, or is there something else that we should be talking about that we're not? And so there's the power of the question. Just getting people to think about the future that they want. A question. Even with conflict, and here's where I can see that I've developed as a facilitator over the years. I used to be scared to death of, what if they get into conflict? What if they get mad at each other? And so now I think of conflict totally different. Instead of just shrinking away from it or trying to tamp it down, I get close to it and start asking questions. You know, it seems like we've hit on a pretty painful subject here. Am I right? Do we want to talk more about it? Is it just between the two of you? Is it something that everybody's involved in? So not being afraid to get close to conflict and using questions to either bring the stuff up to the surface or get far enough that we can say, well, we can put a bracket around that for now. and can we put a bracket around it, or do we need to talk about it? And literally thanking people for putting it out there. I saw another facilitator do this when it was getting very fractious. And he said, thank you for putting it out there, because if we didn't, it would just stay underground and we couldn't move forward. But the power of the question, when somebody says something, off the wall, or seems to be wanting to interfere with the process, asking a good question, what prompted you to bring that up? Or do we need to do it now? I know that whatever happens in a group, I can always ask a question as my facilitation strategy, and it has never failed me. And as I said earlier, not being afraid of conflict, that it's actually, if you lean into it and sort of bring it out, you can address it. And I used to think of conflict as this fire-breathing dragon that I wanted to stay away from. And now my mental image is, as I get closer to the dragon, the fire kind of rolls back into the dragon and it's just smoke, and I can get close and start asking questions. So really the inquiry for me is just the magic of problem solving, conflict resolution, looking into the future, improving processes. Have a question and you'll be fine.
And you use the power of the sword. Your questions are your sword, right?
I guess so. I never thought of them as a sword, but they're like the all-purpose tool. They're like the Swiss Army knife. There's a scissors, there's a little knife, there's a file. It's what you need. And just getting comfortable with asking questions. And it also relates to what Izzy said, is you don't have to know everything. You don't have to be in control of everything, but your tool is good questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathleen. Anybody would like to continue? What were your first learnings, your techniques, your tips?
I'll build on Kathleen because I thought of questions. And when I look back at my journey, I'm a high D on the DISC scale, and I'm very good at seeing the forest through the trees and telling people what to do. And so in the enabling or empowerment world, my learning had to be how to ask really good questions and be comfortable with asking questions. And so the couple of nuggets that I want to share with the participants today is, first of all, most clients are not clear on their expectations of what they want from a group, whether they're the participant or they're a leader at some other level that's looking for an outcome. And so how to have those few questions, in your back pocket to help the leader, the client, be very clear on the purpose for bringing a group together, their scope of authority, that, the expectations for the outcomes of that group. That's the first place to me that questions are very powerful. And then the second place is in preparation for a session, having some questions and being able to interview participants to see where their focus is, where their challenges are, where their concerns are. So I have, of course, gotten better in questions, but definitely value the power of questions as you're preparing for a session. And then, as Kathleen articulated, the questions while you're in the session. Every agenda item, there should be a critical question to answer for that agenda item. So that, from a very basic level, I think is something that every facilitator needs to do well, and that's ask questions.
Who would like to continue? Izzy?
Remind me, what's the focus of this question, of this?
Is one of your first learnings are the tips or techniques that when you started on facilitation and that you continue to use consistently in your practice?
I'll take off a little bit about what Susan and Kathleen had said. And for me, again, coming from where I came from, which was high status, you're in front of the room, you're the teacher, you have the knowledge, you're in control. The concept of understanding the status between the people in the groups and in the organizations, and how, depending on who you speak to, you get different perspectives on what the reality is and what the needs are. So it's really was helpful for me to begin to do, in terms of questions, a lot of pre-work, in terms of sending out surveys, in terms of developing the agenda and the process. So not just speaking to the direct client, the person who's bringing me in, but to get a sense of where the perceptions are about what this issue is. In very simple terms, I remember early on a person bringing me in because they thought they had problems with their 50 managers around the country, that they weren't communicating team to team. And speaking to a number of the managers, it turns out that they communicated fine. It was the hierarchy in the organization topped by this person. I've always felt that bringing people into the design process and the thinking as early as possible with pre-work, with surveys, with reaching out, first of all, helps people when they come in to feel part of the process. And secondly, that I understand what the different perspectives are, because facilitation to me on some level is all about perspective, which changes your goal or changes your objectives. So this issue about, and again, it came from myself also, recognizing that the hardest part for me in facilitation was giving up my status. And then I realized the easiest thing in facilitation was giving up my status. Because then, I'm not, whatever happens, happens. That shifting dynamics within organizations, teams, and groups really was an early insight for me, especially coming from where I came, which is a very one up, one down kind of situation. You're in control or you're not. And facilitation is much more fluid than that.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Izzy. Cameron.
So for me, the people that taught me to facilitate have 2 5-day courses. And the first one they talk about is they take you and they program you. It's kind of like a cult. And the second program, they deprogram you. And the idea is, so this is an organization that is heavily process driven, very structured thinking. And so the first program is about, here's the processes, or here's some processes, do them this way, do them because we say so, do it because it works. And then the second course is to take you away from that and teach you how to wing it and be more flexible in your approach. And I loved both of them. And at the time, the first one particularly appealed to me because I grew up around airplanes. Learned to fly when I was 17, flown most of my life, lived with checklists. And so this structured thinking was a piece that immediately appealed. And over the years, I've had that reinforced a number of times. One of the most profound ones was with someone that I met at that conference with the IAF in 2000. It was a fellow named Bob Briggs, who was one of the leading lights in building a software tool around facilitation. And what they had done is think about how people think and try to recreate that in a software tool. And basically they said there's 7 basic patterns of the way people think. If we build a software tool for each one of those, we can replicate the way people think, and we can replicate any process. And what that had me doing was looking back on the way I facilitated and the way I've facilitated since. So what it's reinforced for me is that structured process thinking that I first saw in the very first course, but reinforced it in a way where it's not about the process anymore, it's about what the people can do. And so I sum it up by saying the best processes and the best facilitators only ask people to think one way at a time. We don't do brainstorming and evaluation at the same time. We do one and then we do the next. So we're methodical and we're careful. And that's what, for me, what process is about making it easier for people by being methodical. again, I go back to that was sort of a first principle I learned, and it was 10 years later that I really had, for me, a good way of describing it.
Your mic is off, Hector.
Oh,
Now it's off again.
no. No?
Good.
Okay, so we have very different approaches, very different learnings. But no, normally what was when you were starting your crafts and calling yourself a facilitator, you were, Kathleen was saying one of her first obstacles was to overcome conflict and being afraid of working with it. What are the other obstacles that you faced when you started that were more difficult, and how were you able to overcome them? Because we all have our demons, we all have our dragons, and as a facilitator, sometimes we have our weaknesses as well. So when we started, I think you already have started talking about that, but I would like to go a little bit deeper, maybe in the practical sense. How did you went and overcome those? It would be a very interesting for us to know.
Well, I'd like to share one that I'm actually still working on, and it relates to letting go of the outcome. Because when I first started facilitating, when things went well, I was really happy for one thing, but I thought, oh, I did a really good job. They got their plan done, or they did what they wanted to do. But the downside of that is that if things don't go as well, if something has happened and people aren't comfortable that day, which has happened, I remember one time people said, we just got a memo that there are going to be layoffs. Why are we planning for the future? That sort of thing. So if you get yourself too self-congratulated about the good outcomes, that means you are going to feel pretty bad about the bad outcomes, or the less than stellar outcomes, that when things didn't go. So I still have to work on. I'm joyful when people are also happy about the outcome and they got done what they wanted to, but to not be too invested in the outcome myself. It's still a struggle. So I'm always happy when it goes well. But I also realize that it's a sort of an alchemy that takes place between the group and the task and the facilitator. So I don't know if that made sense or not, but just not being so attached to the outcome. You do the very best you can. And sometimes things don't go as well as you would have liked. That's part of it. Happens.
Thank you, Kathleen. Very interesting. It's just letting go. It relates a little bit to what you were saying, Izzy, right? It's tough.
It is tough in that it's hard to control and surrender at the same time. Mm-hmm. So that's so one of the dynamics. To go to the question, I think for me the hard part is still working on something that I got from Open Space from Lisa Heft, and that the right people show up. Mm-hmm. So whether it's 3 people or 50 people or 90 people, that those are the people who I need to facilitate with. And it's taken me a while, and I think I'm pretty good at it, and it still takes work to understand that this is the situation. It's almost like trying to take my own advice. To facilitate my own process, that the right people show up, and then to pay attention to those people and to see what's happening. It took a while. I mean, I still, I'm a fairly competitive person. I do have some stuff about, well, if there's 3 or 4 sessions going on, why are those people having more in their group than my group? And it's a constant self-talk with me of saying that, of accepting that. And then what that has given me is really a benefit of understanding the gift that those people have given me, rather than thinking about who else could have been there or how else it could have been made different, that these people chose to be here, or to respond to the surveys. Let's say, you know, that was another thing when I started sending out surveys. Out of 100 people or 50 people, you get 3, 4, 5, but the same 4 or 5 people who will raise their hands during the session or have. So I've had to work on being present, you know, and accepting, and then seeing that as you know, this is the process, which is exactly, and one day I realized this is exactly the complaints that people in my facilitations have. They're missing something. They don't get enough money. They don't have the right people. The timeline is, you know, and I think, wait a minute, I don't want to be like that.
We're only human.
Yeah, I guess so.
There's somebody, one of the participants, Linda, you have your hand raised. Would you like to share questions just to know? Hi, Linda. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Yes, just a quick comment on some of the other things that I've learned that we need to overcome. I'm a little different. I'm a facilitator and a trainer in the automotive industry. So I think some of the things that I deal with might be a little bit unique. But one of the things that I found out, I've been training and facilitating for about 14 years. I've had to learn how to be comfortable with quiet time. There are times when you may pose a question and you may just have to wait for it to sink in. And I have a tendency to want to fill that dead air time with conversation. And one of the things I've had to learn is myself to be a little bit more patient, let everything gel in the group's mind. And then, as Kathleen was talking about, work that fine art of questioning to pull out more conversation. But patience is a big key, and I think that's one of the things that has made me more successful. But thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you. Definitely, I think we like conversations to flow. And when we're doing our job, it's getting people to move and exchange. So silent time, it may be like, this is unproductive. The group is not working. But actually, you have to let some questions sink in, as Linda is sharing, and allow people to actually answer them in a reflective manner. So Susan, you're going to share?
Hi. So we're talking about obstacles. You know, I was having a little bit of trouble of obstacle or major challenge surface, but the one thing that came to mind is I do like structure and I do like process. So I create a detailed facilitation plan for every single work session. And a couple of years ago, I was working with a colleague and they saw my detailed facilitation plan. They were like, there'll probably come a time when you won't do that. And I thought, I don't know if I could agree with that. So I think still today, I create a detailed facilitation plan, but I'm not as rigid. If the group decides it needs to go another way, or it has a suggestion for a better process that I didn't uncover in my preparation, I'm okay and comfortable with that. Versus perhaps when I was starting out, I thought I had to be very rigid to drive this group to that, outcome that was expected of them. So that's building a little bit on what Kathleen said also, is you do have to get comfortable. And that I think my watch out is don't be overconfident and think that you've been facilitating a long time and you can just go by, fly by the seat of your pants. I don't recommend that. And so the other thought that came to mind with this question was, some people just don't like structure. They don't like the facilitator, leading. They don't like flip charts. They don't like markers, Post-its, whatever it is. And I have to become okay with that, because of course I want everybody to love the session and like that they achieved results, but not everybody does, and you can't please everyone all the time. So getting comfortable with it will ensure that you don't have facial expressions or mannerisms that people think that you don't like them or what they said. So that's what came to mind. Yeah.
I have to agree that sometimes keeping a straight face and not reacting to the comments of participants, it's quite a challenge. For most of us, we don't go into acting classes to be able to hold our own in front of something that may be blatantly against the group itself, but you cannot say anything. I mean, the group is the one that needs to counter the opinions and the actions of the rest of the members, and trying to be the objective in as most as you can, right?
So true.
So, Cameron.
So I mentioned that I came from a background where I was delivering a lot of training. And of course, I was speaking with somebody about this just yesterday. The nature of the beast in delivering training is that content expertise is required and expected. And so giving up the content expertise, that content process split, was the biggest challenge for me. And I'd like to contrast my opinion perhaps a little bit with Kathleen's. And what's happened to me is that over the years, I think I've become more attached to the outcomes in a way. And the reason is that for a number of years, probably more than a decade, I started to get a better handle on that staying out of content piece and being better about that. And I parroted it exactly what everyone says. You know, I'm a facilitator. My role is process, not content. It was a little bit mechanical, but it was there, and I lived up to it reasonably well, I think. And a few years ago, I came to a realization that I think in many ways it's a myth. It's, for me, now I'm still absolutely on board with the division of labor between process and content. They do this bit and I do that bit, because if you divide the labor, everybody does a better job. You just have less to do. And as I said earlier, I'm a fundamentally lazy guy. Why should I do both process and content? So, but the piece that I've come to realize, at least for me, is that if I spend any more than an hour with a client or a group, there is no way on earth I am neutral. I develop an interest in these people and their success. And so I'm not unbiased. I'm interested in the outcome. I'm interested in them being successful. What I need to be is conscious of that bias and be careful about not letting it influence my behavior. So I'm not neutral. I am absolutely not neutral. And I probably have an opinion. The challenge is for me, is not to be neutral. It's to behave in a way that my lack of neutrality does not affect, or at least does not affect the outcome much, so that they get the best value out of their thinking. And I think being more conscious of the fact that I have the bias, and I'm likely to have the bias, has made me better at taking care of that. And there is the other thing that I say about this, and it is part of letting go of the end of the day, because sometimes the end of the day does not go as well as we would like. And I say to people, you know, at the end of the day, if it didn't work, I get to go home and my wife and my kids and my dog still love me. Well, I'm sure about the dog.
Well, definitely a challenge for everyone. A challenge for all of us to be aware and mindful. Because I do think that mindfulness of the facilitator, it's tough to live by. And well, some of you have talked about the competences of the facilitator, right? And actually the certification as well. So during your process, are there any certain elements of the profession that you focus more on your practice, maybe?
Well, I'm not sure it's exactly answering your question, but it kind of goes back to the role of process versus content. I do actually sometimes have things to share that are actually content related because I get around to a lot of different organizations and I feel like I should share that. So, but I make it very clear to the group. I'll say, I'm taking off my facilitation hat now and I want to share with you something that I know about this because another group I'm working with tried this and they found that XYZ. So I do actually sometimes get out of process and be more of a consultant, but I make it very clear to the group that I've just changed my role and now I'm getting back into my facilitation role. So I don't know if that's, standard practice, but it's what I do because I feel like if I know something, I should share it with the group. So I just make it real clear when I'm changing a role and when I'm back into my straight facilitator role.
It's probably the only piece of the statement of values and code of ethics that I think I can say by memory. And it talks about how we are conscious to minimize our impact on the group. And then it goes on to say, when we have information that the group cannot get any other way, we share with the group being clear in our change of role. And I think that's a really important piece. That for me, the key is the information the group cannot get any other way. And I absolutely agree that if you have something that they don't and can't get, the ethically correct thing to do is share. Exactly the way you've described.
In the end, the success of the facilitator is the actual success of the group, because you're there because of the group. You're the reason that we exist is to help the group, right? So, Izzy, is there any challenges that you would like to share?
I think that just to take off on what Cameron and Kathleen had said in terms of neutrality, it is a tough one. I think part of being a facilitator is also being an observer, because you're observing the process, which means you're observing the interactions, you're observing yourself, creating the container and the process within it. So it makes sense as an observer to comment on things that are seen in the context of as an observer, here's what's true, or as a content person. So certainly that's doable. The challenges for me, other than the ones that I've already talked about, I'll take it back to the dilemma IAF has had for the 20 years I've been a member of the organization, is no one can define a facilitator. No, it's like having a mission. You're in an organization that's trying to find its mission after 20 years of doing something. So, there's always this, what is a facilitator? Well, it's this, we have this definition. And yet, you still say to people, what are you doing? You say, I'm a facilitator. They go, what's that? Or you're a trainer, or so on. So I think one of the challenges is to really be aware of how you present yourself and how you design the process and what you're going in for in terms of developing the design and developing the process and letting go of the path. But I think that one of the challenges is just this potpourri of things we do that don't have a clear picture in people's minds. Or ourselves. I mean, we're still asking the same question at IAF conferences. What do you tell people you do? And we all have different explanations.
That's a really powerful thing for me, because it's one of these things that's hard to define, but easy to see if you're there.
Yeah.
And as a consequence, it's hard for us to define the value. We know what it is. People who've been in the sessions know what the value is. And in fact, I'm in the throes of negotiating with a potential client right now. What is clear is that they would like to do what they want to do for less money. And what that means for me is one of two things. It means I have to do the same amount of work for less money, which means I'm lowering the rate and not making a profit, or I do less work and increase the risk of failure, right? And the challenge for me at the moment is to define this in a way that this particular client, who doesn't seem to be entirely on board with it, understands the value they're going to get from employing me or somebody like me.
Sometimes it feels like a facilitator is like the iPad in a pre-iPad world. Before iPads, nobody cared about iPads and nobody knew about them and nobody needed them. But once you try it, you want to buy one right away. And that happens plenty.
I also wonder if we're in some ways in a post-iPad world, because certainly I've run into situations where people have seen it and, oh yeah, anybody can do that. Right?
Oh yeah.
It's not appreciated as a body of skill.
Well, the thing is the first time they tried the Chinese knockoff, they knew they wanted an iPad. Definitely. Susan, so could you share?
Oh, thanks, Hector. I'm going to take us back just a bit, and then we'll go forward again. When we were talking about neutrality, the vision that came into play for me was exactly this. When we facilitate a session, and especially if it's a group that we haven't been with before, you will notice as a facilitator that the individuals in the group think they need to tell the facilitator the answer to the question. So my most powerful moments are when we get into the group and the people are talking to each other, and I can pose the question, it may be in the form of an exercise or whatever, and I can walk away, not be in the front of the room, not be the orchestra conductor. I can step to the side because they're talking to each other versus thinking they need to tell me the information, share their knowledge, their wisdom. And so I think if all facilitators can be very aware of that moment when the group and the individuals are talking to each other versus answering the facilitator's question, that gives you, I think, a good gauge of is the group owning this, or is the facilitator seen as the consultant, the SME, the whatever. So I just wanted to point that one piece out. Going on to this, what does a facilitator do? I've given up. My best clients come from repeat business or word of mouth. You need Susan there because this is what she does. I have given up on trying to sell or market to new people. So sorry, I don't have any wisdom there, but it's just like Izzy said, 20 years later, we're still trying to do define facilitator. And today, coaches, trainers, keep yada yadas, they're calling themselves facilitators. So I gave up.
Probably is one of the challenges that, as you've seen the profession evolve. I mean, you've all have a bunch of experience in your lifetime about how facilitation was, what has become nowadays. You've seen the profession and the association grow. So what were the main changes that you've seen from now back then and now, and the challenges? I think for the ones that are participating here would like to know, okay, what are the challenges for the future that you envision? What are the challenges that people that are starting their profession right now will have to deal with in maybe right now or in the very near future? Not everybody at the same time, please.
I'll go. I can give you two just offhand.
Please.
One of which is not related to the necessarily to the topic of this webinar, and we'll see if I can remember the second one after I get past the first one. The first one is quite frankly, the business challenge. Um, I have a friend who's an actor who once described being an actor as having two jobs, one of which is going to auditions, and the other is doing the work. And you have to be good at both, and they're different. And independent facilitators have the same challenges, getting the work and doing the work. And my experience in Canada has been, in the last 8 or 9 years, pursuing the work has become much harder than it was before then. So that's an ongoing challenge. The other piece to me that is the challenge about being a facilitator is the kinds of things that I think everyone has talked about today. We start from a place where we begin to think we understand this and we can work it and structure our thinking and do all the stuff we're supposed to do. And the challenge for me has been that the more I learn, the less I know. And it's about integrating all of the possible information that is out there. I was chatting with somebody earlier today, and we were talking about people that get almost evangelical about methodology. And here's this methodology, and there's only one way to do it. And if you try and deviate from that, that's not appropriate. And we've talked about how important it is to be flexible. Well, there's a path from one to the other. And I think the biggest challenge, and what will make anybody a better facilitator than they were starting out, is that move to flexibility.
Thank you so much, Cameron.
Hector,
Please, Susan.
biggest change I've seen is use of technology. So I think I've always worked with global groups and we've managed somehow. But today, to me, the use of technology, the different, various, numerous types of technology to bring groups together, I can't keep up with it. One organization has this, another organization wants you to do that, another one wants you to try this, and I really can't keep up with it. So I still tout myself as low-tech, high engagement. Best scenario, if it's really significant, serious issues, actions, whatever, bring people in the room together. So I'm staying on that low-tech, high engagement. I cannot keep up with technology, and I wonder if others have seen that change and if it's posing a problem.
Thank you, Susan. Please, Izzy.
To piggyback on Susan, certainly the technology aspect is a challenge because of so many virtual teams and virtual groups. And it's a challenge. It's a big challenge. It's a challenge for the design. It's a challenge for the process. It's a challenge to get results. The other challenge I would see moving forward is the inherent, I would say, discomfort that people feel in organizations. That there seems to be because of so many changes, because of the uncertainty about present and future, because of the globalization, there's always this current of we're brought in to facilitate a particular process or a particular issue, and there are so many other things going on for these folks that the conflict comes out, the passive aggressiveness comes out. Sometimes I found myself as the facilitator being the person people reveal secrets to. So there's so many things going on other than the facilitation that I think it's important to be aware. And here I would go back again to the pre-work and the surveys and the research. And it's very much like going back to Gordon's point about business, Cameron, about business, that there's a sales aspect to this business if you're working for yourself. There's a marketing aspect to it. There's a financial aspect to it. Getting to know your clients, keeping up with your clients. So it's a business strategy, and it's very much you're being dumped into a situation that has so many different factors that you need to become aware of. So that's a challenge I see also.
Thank you, Izzy. Please, Kathleen.
I don't think this is a new challenge, but with the churn going on in all organizations, it could be getting worse. And that is that so many people get promoted to leadership positions because they're good at what they do. They may or may not have the habits of mind and the skill and the mindset to be a good leader, and be confident enough to believe that it's important to involve people in the decision making and in processes they're responsible for and the like. So in a lot of places, you have an ethos among the leadership is that really they should just do what we tell them to do. And I have had clients like that where the leadership team said, our job is to tell people what to do. So to some extent, at least in the United States, where it's still pretty hierarchical, and I'm sure other places too, you still have to buck that mindset that the managers and leaders are to make decisions and the people below are supposed to follow them. It's still pretty ingrained, that Taylorism is still pretty ingrained in our culture in the United States, and probably other places too for different reasons. But really that shift of mind to we're a system and all the players need to be engaged for full functioning, I think that's still a challenge. And of course, as facilitators, we're all in for engagement and participation.
I want to add to that. Yeah, I want to add, Kathleen, it's so true. I've experienced it, and Izzy made me think of it also. As a facilitator, we wear many hats, and at times we're privileged to sensitive information. We start wearing a coaching hat, helping leaders, think through what do they want, who are the right people. And 2 years ago, I had a decision if I wanted to move into this coaching. And I have a select few clients that I do repeat business, and they've seen so many facilitated sessions and how employees, staff are more satisfied because they are engaged, they are asked, they're able to give their opinions, share their wisdom. And so I have this coaching model that is a facilitative leader model. And my business is moving to quite a bit of coaching, which, trust me, I didn't go out there and market it or sell it. I had to, Google what do coaches do, like Coaching 101. But I think it's so important for us to role model facilitative leadership skills, and every opportunity we get, coach that, even if we don't say we are coaching leadership skills, facilitative leadership skills. So you're spot on. Yeah.
I have a friend who describes this in facilitator terms. He says that leadership is a process job. And almost inevitably what happens is people get promoted to a process job because of their content knowledge, and they're lost.
Okay.
Oh, it's a good reference. Absolutely. So we're basically in the final couple 3-4 minutes here. So I would like if you can, what would be your recommendations for the rest of us, people who may be starting their craft or their journey as an inside facilitator, as an internal facilitator, or as working their own business, or alongside other professionals? Well, maybe they do facilitation part-time and they use also the training hat because that's what the market requests from them. What would you recommend for them to continue growing in this art form that we call facilitation? Please, Izzy.
I'll go back to what I said at the beginning, that I recommend your facilitation journey as self-actualization. And because it is so complex and deals with so many aspects of human interaction and organizational desires, that, again, I'll just use myself. Whenever I notice some resistance, whether it be to control, whether it be to status, whether it be to fear or courage, facilitation has helped me acknowledge where my fears are, my uncertainties, my friction, my discomfort. And by working on the processes and learning through IAF and other places, the process and the skill and the art of facilitation, it really has helped me. So what I would suggest to the folks that you were talking about is don't negate the fact that how you respond to situations is an indication of where there might be a log jam, a block, or an opportunity. And treat yourself as you might treat one of your participants, with questions, with objective acknowledgement and compassion.
I love that recommendation. Ask ourselves as we would ask our participants. Mm-hmm. That's insightful. Thank you, Izzy.
You're welcome.
Anyone would like to continue? Kathleen?
Well, I would like to just clarify something that I was talking about earlier, so as to make sure I explained it well. I want my clients to succeed, and I feel like I bring them a good set of skills that will, suggest they probably will. So I just wanted to make sure that people understood that I love it when things go well, and I want my clients to succeed. But I just want to not pat myself too hard on the back, realizing there are other factors that can interfere. So I just wanted to say that. And just to hitchhike on what Izzy said, all the tools in the world are not going to be effective if your head isn't in the right place as a facilitator. To humbly come to the group with what you have to offer, and really respect the single person in the room and what they can contribute. To me, that where your head is more important than having the knowing, all the tools that there are to use. It's kind of like the first. The self-knowledge in the integral model. So having your own head in the right place is probably the most important facilitator tool that I can think of.
Thank you, Kathleen. Susan, please.
Yeah, thanks, Hector. And thanks, you've done a great job moderating this for us. I appreciate that. My thoughts go to find your passion. My passion is fulfilled when I see a group achieve more than they ever expected they could. So find your passion, drive towards it, you will be successful and you will feel fulfilled.
Absolutely. Thank you, Susan. Much appreciated. And Cameron?
Life is holistic. And I think it's important to think of it in those terms. Some of the most useful insights for me about facilitation have come when I've been doing something else, completely unrelated. Flying sailplanes, reading a book on climbing Everest, riding my bike. And it's been surprising to me how important those insights have been, but they've been important to me. And so I think you treat it as part of a whole. If you want to be a better facilitator, if I want to continue to develop, I need to pay attention to the whole.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate everybody. I want to thank again Susan, Kathleen, Izzy, and Cameron for responding to the call that I made a month ago, for participating in this session. And if there's any other question that would like to share, any of you would like to have, please make sure that you put it on the chat box. But I think it's going to be very helpful and very insightful for everybody. We're gonna be publishing this on the professional resource development page that's available for all IF members inside the IF website, and make sure to tune in to our next one. Our next session is going to be focused on IF facilitators and friends. That's the topic of our next global flip chart, and we're going to be investigating a little bit about how our profession relates to other professional organizations as well. So make sure you stay tuned, okay? Thank you all very much for participating and for your time, and hope to see you in the next one, okay?
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Hector. Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.